Hiya! Welcome to video 5 of our series of videos covering our digital subtitle training program. If you've not seen the first 4, do make sure you go and watch those first in order. I'm your favourite host, Ollie, Program Systems Manager at StageTags. And just a reminder, these videos cover a training session that is usually paid for, but we're putting this out into the world for free because we feel that's what needed right now. We're a charity, which means we can do stuff like that, but it also means that we rely on the wonderful donations from people like you. If you can, the link for donations will be in the description, but you can also support us by liking and sharing these videos to spread awareness of how to subtitle to the best level of quality. Speaking of quality, here we go, video 5. Okay, let's crack on into this. This is going to be the fun video when subtitling goes wrong and subtitle best practice. Not that the rest weren't fun, I'm sure you've thoroughly enjoyed me rambling on at you, but this is going to be the really fun one. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some examples of when subtitling was done less than perfectly and use that to illustrate what is the best way to subtitle and what subtitle best practice is for the sake of the users. First example here, Benedict Cumberbatch. I'm sure you all can see the problem here. So obviously subtitles need to be accurate, they need to be spelled correctly, they need to be true. You need to replicate what's actually being said. This image here is actually probably live subtitled using a process called re-speaking, which is where you have sort of a mask on, it has microphones in it, and the person repeats everything that's been said using a highly trained voice, which then goes into software that is paired up with their specific voice so that it's better than speech recognition software because it is designed specifically for them. The problem here, the real problem, is that live subtitling was not prepared. With this kind of software, what it does is it kind of guesses what the most likely word is. It takes the sound in and goes, right, we've got these sounds here, it's probably this word. And a word like Benedict Cumberbatch is not a really regularly used word, so it's kind of low on the guest list, which means that the speech recognition software would not think that that would be likely. If, however, they'd known in advance they were going to talk about this particular person, then they could tell the software that, and the software could put that higher on the list, so then when it gets those sounds, it's more likely to think, oh wait, maybe it's this one. So that really highlights the importance of being prepared, of knowing in advance what's going to be said. And this is true also as subtitling, because especially if you've got, say, an interview with someone where they're using complicated words, jargon, or they're using phrases or saying that are maybe in a different language, if you know that you're going to be subtitling that video, then at the time when you're making it, you can say, we need to have that written down. What did you say there? What was that thing? Please write it down so we can get the spelling correct. And this also, again, also shows why you should not rely on YouTube's automated captions for the same reason, because they're just not going to be accurate. So next one, we've got 3 lines, woman vocalizing, some musical notes, and man speaking backwards. So yes, what does woman vocalizing sound like? Can anyone tell me? I mean, I know you can't, I can't, it's a rhetorical question. Woman vocalizing doesn't tell me anything about what she is actually singing. She could be going, ooh, or ah, or ee. You know, there's all sorts of sounds that she could be making, and that subtitle does not tell me what that sound is. Same with man speaking backwards. When you're creating subtitles, a really important point to remember is that you're trying to give your deaf audiences the same experience as your hearing audiences. If a man says something backwards and you're hearing him, you could maybe pick out some bits here and there and say, oh, I think he's saying this. With subtitles, saying man speaking backwards, you don't have that. If you typed it backwards, then deaf audiences will have the same experience. They could read it and go, that looks like this, but I'm confused, and now it's gone because he's got moved on too far. It confuses people in the same way and gives them the same experience. You need to subtitle it verbatim. This is especially true of music videos, or maybe if it's a filming of a concert where the focus is the lyrics themselves. If it's background music, and we'll come to this later on, but if it's background music, you don't need to do it kind of the same way. But if it's about the lyrics, the audience needs to know what is being sung so they can experience that in the same way as everyone else. I kind of have the sort of horror story about this not been done too well. So one of my favourite musicals is The Little Shop of Horrors, and I've seen it years and years ago on video, long before subtitles were, nearly as common as they are now. And I loved it, but I had no idea what was going on, but I just loved it because it's great. And then at university, a friend of mine had the DVD of it, and I was thrilled. And it had the subtitles, and it said on the back, subtitles in English. I was so excited, I couldn't wait to watch it. So we had like a big party gathering, got everyone over, we set up the DVD and we start playing it. And the song starts, there's a song that starts, and the subtitles just had in square brackets, upbeat song about living on Skid Row for the whole song, except for one bit in the middle where the characters talked and it subtitled what they said, and then it went back to upbeat song about living on Skid Row. Now this was for a musical where, of course, the songs are part of the plot, they move the story along, but they hadn't subtitled the songs, so when the songs moved the story along, I couldn't follow along with that because I didn't know what they had been singing. So don't do that, please. Do better. Do subtitle the lyrics when it is the focus. Okay? Why would you subtitle a music video or musical and not provide the words to the songs? The formatting is also not great on here. With subtitling, you would only ever have 2 lines, which is different from theatre captioning, which is 3 lines, but with subtitling it is 2 lines maximum. It was on the bottom of the screen, and the musical notes, you would have those inside the music label, but again we'll come to that later on. Next on when subtitling goes wrong, scary crime music. So similar to my question about the last one, what does scary crime music sound like? However many of you are watching this and all the examples you came up with, I'm pretty sure they would not all be the same. People have different ideas of what scary crime music sounds like because that is an interpretation. And this is really important. Subtitles need to be factual, particularly with sound labels. It's tricky because we all have this instinct to interpret sound and music and say this is an emotional song that is, romantic or whatever. But it's important to be factual because not everyone will interpret things in the same way. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to enforce your own interpretation on your viewers. You want to give them the space to react how they want to. So for example, scary crime music, it could be some, violins or something, and some viewers may find that it is hilarious and it doesn't match the scene at all, and they just laugh when they hear the sound. By labeling it scary crime music, you prevent the deaf viewers from doing that. So you want to be factual. Usually what you do is you describe the instrument, kind of maybe it's a tempo, what kind of, if it's toned or if it's a tune or if, these kind of things. Essentially describing what is the instrument, what is it doing, and how fast is it doing it, kind of thing. And same with sort of sound effects. You don't want to do scary sounds. You want to describe the sounds. I find dogs scary, and dogs barking scares me, but it doesn't scare other people. So if you had scary dog barking, then obviously I would find that scary, but other viewers may not. And if you just describe it as scary noises, then you are enforcing that interpretation on them as well as me. For music, best practice, if it's background music, best practice is to have in all capitals, in square brackets, the song name followed by the artist, again in all caps. If it's not possible, or if it's a lesser known song that people wouldn't recognize, then you would describe it as objectively as possible. So, piano, tones, electronic beeps, these kind of things, just to really allow the audiences to make their own interpretation. Next up, singing in Korean, singing in Korean, singing in Korean. So again, 3 lines here, which you wouldn't do. You would just do 2 lines. And again, it needs to be factual and verbatim. And this is including if it's in a different language. So going back to what I said previously, you're trying to give deaf audiences the same experience as hearing audiences. If a hearing person knows Korean and is watching the song, they'll understand what's being said because they know the Korean and they can follow along with it. If a deaf person knows Korean and they see these subtitles saying singing Korean, they can't follow along. So in this case, what you would want to do is you would want to subtitle it in Korean script so that it is accurate to what's actually being said. Of course, I appreciate that not everyone has a Korean script or keyboard, so the next best thing is to transliterate it into Latin characters, so the English alphabet that we use, and then subtitle it phonetically, so that that's still something that the audience, the deaf audiences, can follow along with. This also, again, reinforces the point about preparing in advance when things are in a foreign language. So when you're filming it and you go, I don't know what that is, grab the markers, please can you write this down, what it is that you said, so that we can subtitle it and include that in the subtitling, and it makes life easier, you know, in a couple of weeks when we are doing the video. And the same is of course true for music. If you have music being done for the video, when it's being put on, note down what the song is, note down what the artist is, so that when you subtitle it, you have it there, so that that information is not lost. If you haven't done that, there is Shazam. You can always use Shazam to recognize the song. Otherwise, if you're using music in the video, you technically should have the rights to the music, so there should be a paper trail that you can follow to get the name and the artist of the music. So you really should definitely have that label. Next one, sobbing mathematically. Now, I'm pretty sure this is a meme. I hope this hasn't been done, but it does highlight the point of being factual and not interpretive. What does sobbing mathematically sound like? It doesn't sound like anything because it's not a real sound. So again, you would just put sobbing there and leave it up to the viewer to interpret whether or not Spock sobs in math numbers or not. Similarly, hair trembles with emotion on a picture of David Tennant. So yeah, again, I hope this is a meme. Don't do this, please. Keep it factual. It's not even a sound. Please don't describe the action, which you would think would be obvious. However, I have seen videos on YouTube which have community captions where members of the community can volunteer to do the subtitling, and in the subtitles they describe the actions. They would say this person moves over there, and of course that doesn't help me at all and actually makes life more difficult because the subtitles aren't matching up to the sound that I'm hearing, and it's causing a cognitive dissonance. Another thing that I have seen done in community captions is I've seen people put their personal thoughts about what's being said into the caption. So they'll type subtitle what someone has said, and then in brackets they put their opinion of that, which again, it's like, what are you doing? That's what the comment section is for, not the subtitles. The subtitles are there so that I can hear what's being said, not hear your thoughts. I don't want to hear your thoughts. I don't read the comment section because I don't want to hear it. It's annoying, it makes it difficult to read, and it's patronizing. We can see what's going on, you know, we can follow it. You don't need to describe every single little thing. Following on with the sort of patronizing theme, we've got a tennis court, and the subtitles say tick-tack, tick-tack, tick. And it's of course subtitling the sound of the tennis ball hitting the floor. Now with sound effects, there's a bit of a nuance here. If the sound is the expected sound as a result of something that happens on screen, then there's no need to subtitle it. So if I clap my hand on screen, I wouldn't need to subtitle it because you can see that I've just clapped my hands. So you can see, you would expect there to be a clapping sound. If I clap my hand off screen, you don't know that I've done that. So the subtitle is there to inform viewers that it's there. Because obviously if you can't see the action causing it, you don't know it's happening. But if you can see the action causing it, then you don't need to subtitle it because, you know, we're intelligent people, we can make guesses. Like imagine if you were watching an action movie and every time someone fired a gun on screen it said gun fires or gunshot every single time. It would be too much. You don't need to do it. On the other hand, if the sound that results from the on-screen action is unexpected, then you would subtitle it. So if the ball honked every time it hit the floor, even though it's a tennis ball, you would, you know, subtitle it like ball honking. So an example of how this is done right, peanuts growling. The peanuts are on screen, the source of the sound is on screen, but they have no mouths, so we would not know that they were growling unless you subtitled that. Yeah, so this is actually a correct way to do it. Going back to things going wrong, stealing intensifies. This is obviously again descriptive and it's not actually a sound. It's part of the plot or character, action, not something you would need to subtitle, and I hope also probably a meme. Remember, you're just doing the sound That's all you're doing. You're turning the audio into a visual soundtrack so that people can follow along. Just some sort of general tips. Grammar, of course, has got to be on point. Make sure that your full stops, your commas are there, capital letters after full stops. Punctuation, of course, same thing, make sure that's in there. Subtitles phase zone. This is something we always talk about, and it's important to remember during production of the video. So you might have noticed down at the bottom of our video, we've got a little logo and the numbers, but there's this blank space there. And this space has been kept free specifically to allow the subtitles to fit in there. You want to make sure that anything like these name labels, like logos, anything, any text or picture descriptions are not in this space so that the subtitles don't cover them, so they don't cover the subtitles. Just keep that space free. And once again, this is why it's important to plan out the subtitles from the start. Don't leave it to the last minute to add on at the very end. Make sure that it's part of the plan, part of the schedule from the very start, so that when people are putting together the video, when they're filming, they can make sure there's nothing in that space. When they're editing, they can make sure that they don't put anything in there. And then when it comes to subtitling, it just slots in nice and easy. And the best place for subtitles is at the bottom. There's studies that looked at different positioning, but the best place is there because when you're looking at a person's face, up close, for deaf people who lip read, they usually look in this area. And it's much easier to go from here down to the bottom of the screen and then back up than it is to go here, past their face to the top and back down. We have on occasion subtitle things at the top because there's just no space on the bottom. It does happen and it is doable, but I can attest from a viewer point of view, it's not as easy to read. It looks really odd. So you do want to keep them at the bottom as much as possible. And because this is also kind of the industry standard, people know that that's where they're going to be. They know to expect them there. And you don't want to add sort of the cognitive task of looking for the subtitles, which is also why you don't want them moving around the screen so much. It really is better just to keep them in one place, so they just become sort of a subconscious glance down, there they are, got them, got the information, back up. So line breaks and short sentences, this is kind of about the formatting of the size of the subtitles. It's much better to have subtitles be two short lines, one on top of each other, than one long line. The reason for this is because, as we've mentioned, people glance at the subtitles, they don't sit and read them, they're not reading the long line across the screen. They flick down and they take what they need. And when they're in two bite-sized pieces on top of each other, it's much easier to grab the whole thing at once, because if you look at the example on screen, if you look at the actually, you can still see its quiet look at the sort of in your peripheral around the word actually. Whereas if it was one long line, you looked at actually, you would see it's actually quiet and that's it. You wouldn't see the bit in the second line. And again, it's not being directly read, it's kind of subconsciously being processed. So just having the information condensed together just makes it easier to grab it all and pull it all in. Generally, you want to try and aim to have a longer bottom line than a longer top line, so that the top line doesn't obscure as much as what's going on the screen. However, the priority is to find a natural break in the sentence where both sentences, both lines, still make sense. So if this one on screen was all one sentence, it would be, it's actually quite calm, look at the clouds. Splitting it after calm, you've got, it's actually quite calm, look at the clouds. Both those sentences still make sense. Together, they still make sense, even with a pause in the middle. And so the whole subtitle as a whole will make sense. This is something that does take practice, just to get used to and just to learn where to find those natural breaks. And it does take time, but stick with it. Have a look, really study the language, really get used to it. Maybe say things out loud if you can't work it out, get someone else to read it. You can develop these skills and practice and get really good at it. So it's just easy, it's done like right there, done, boom. When two people are speaking, so if you've got multiple people speaking sort of at the same time or right after each other, and so you put the subtitles together at the same time, you want to have a hyphen at the start. This is just to indicate that each line of the subtitle is a different speaker's line. If they're on screen, it's just the hyphen, because the viewers can see the people on screen and so they can lip read and match up each line with each person. However, if they are off screen, then you would need to add a name label. This is true if they are speaking off screen by themselves or off screen with another person. However, if you've done the name label once and they carry on speaking, you don't need to do it for every single line. Just the first one until someone else starts talking, and then you interrupt, unless you can see that someone new is talking. The reason for this is because for hearing audiences, they will be able to recognize the character's voice and so know who is speaking, and they will be able to know that two people are speaking off screen at the same time. For deaf audiences, they may not necessarily be able to pick up on this, so you need to give them the name so they can follow along. And then same rule applies if multiple people are speaking, add a hyphen. Sound effects and music, this is a little bit where it gets a little bit more tricky, because we like to interpret music and sound effects, but in subtitling you have to be as factual as you possibly can. So with sound effects, you want to be descriptive. We talked a little bit about the tennis ball and whether it's on screen or off screen, but when you actually are labeling the sound effect, the formatting is square brackets, all capitals, and what you want to do is you want to describe what is causing the sound and what it's doing. So ball squeaking, or the example on screen, crickets singing, or door creaking. So it's object in word. I think this is the technical description is subject followed by active finite verb in present tense. I don't really know what that means because I didn't study English, but it's the thing doing it and what it's doing. And you want to do it in the present tense. You wouldn't describe it in the past and say door was creaking, because when you hear the sound of the door creaking, that sound itself doesn't indicate whether that happened in the past or it's happening now or it's in the future. All you really know is that that door is currently making that noise, and so the subtitle would be this is what it's currently doing. Yeah. And then with music, as mentioned before, it is square brackets, name of the song, hyphen, artist, and you put these little musical notes on the inside to indicate that it is a song. These musical notes you can type in Google, musical note, copy and paste. I've done it before, it's easy. It's really important to make sure that you include this, particularly for people who are deafened or have tinnitus. Tinnitus, if you aren't aware, is this sort of ringing in your ears. It can come and go, it can be consistent. I get it myself sometimes, and this is important because if the music is quiet, it can be hard to differentiate from tinnitus. So make sure that you label it so that people who do have tinnitus know that what they're hearing is not just the tinnitus, there's actual music involved here. And another reason is for people who are completely deaf, capital D deaf, you want to make sure that they are aware of their music. One time, another of my colleagues was saying that they did the mannequin challenge, which was, God, it's a few years ago now, and they imitated what they saw, which was, one in frozen positions as the video panned around. But when they put it out on the internet, a lot of people started making fun of them because what they didn't realize was that the mannequin challenge videos all have music on them. So this video was just some people standing around with no music playing. So it's important that you have that to let people know. With singing, if you're doing the lyrics, you also need to use these musical notes at the start of the lines and use them kind of like quotation marks. So you have at the start of every thing that's being sung, and then you have at the end of the last thing being sung before someone else talks. If you've got some singing and then some talking in the middle and then some more singing, you do the start and then start and the end before the talking, have the talking, and then start again all the way to the end when the singing ends. And then again, the same rules apply. If there's multiple people singing, you have a hyphen. If there's someone singing off screen, you give them a name. So that is kind of the subtitle best practice. We have this sheet which has sort of the guidelines of subtitle best practice, which is available on our website at that digital resources page, which I'm sure will be linked in the description. So do get hold of that and keep that to hand when you are subtitling, because that will be sort of your guiding light. And just kind of like some top tips. We've been through a lot of this, but there's, sort of subtitles need to be verbatim, so they need to be accurate. You can cut out things like and because they don't really add anything, but other than that, you do need to keep it verbatim. Don't cut things out, don't shorten things, keep it verbatim as much as possible. You need to be consistent, so once you do it, make sure you do it for everything. And if you are going to make your own style, which there is a little bit of wiggle room for, particularly in sort of the sound labels, you can use rounded brackets, although I would still recommend having it all capitals. The reason for that being that it's kind of like when you read something in italics, your brain reads it in a different way. And so having it in capitals means that your brain recognizes that it's not the speech, it's just a label. When I've seen labels done in lowercase, I kind of start reading it like it's something that someone's saying, and oh wait, no, that's a label. So having it in capitals differentiates it from the speech. But whatever you're going to do it consistently. Get advice and support. You can get advice and support from us. We're here to help. Get in touch with me or someone else in the team. We will happily discuss anything. You can ask other people on your team, in your organization. You can say, hey, can you help with these subtitles? Can you give these a read through? Can you watch this and let me know if this makes sense? Ask people. This is a team effort. We can do this together. Planning ahead and budgeting. We talked about this before. Make sure that you start from the beginning knowing that subtitles are going to be done, so that everyone throughout the process knows to expect that and knows to leave space for it and knows to leave time for it. Don't just tack it on at the end as an afterthought with no one else knowing that's happening. Make sure that it is there from the start. And then of course all the stuff we've been through, grammar and punctuation, subtitles safe zone, 2 lines max, dashes for multiple people speaking, names for off-screen speakers, don't have the sound effects for evident sounds that are caused by on-screen actions, subtitle sounds that are happening off-screen, music, you've got the song and the artist with the music notes, unless you're subtitling the lyrics, in which case use the music notes with the words and use the music note like quotation marks. And I believe that's everything for subtitle best practice. Thanks again for watching. This is the hard stuff, so really do go and practice this. If you learned something new today, please consider donating. The link will be in the description, and share the video so that others can learn with you. If you have any questions, my email is oliver@stagetech.org. We've got just one last video and then you can go forth and subtitle. So I will see you there. Bye.